They say $1 billion buys you anything, but it couldn't buy Iris Gallagher immunity from the world's cruelty. When a struggling single dad walked into a high society blind date meant to be a humiliating joke, he didn't see a punchline. He saw a queen. And he changed everything. Iris Gallagher ruled over a $4.2 billion shipping and logistics empire from the 44th floor of the Gallagher Building in downtown Seattle. She was brilliant, ruthless in negotiations, and possessed a mind that could untangle global supply chain catastrophes before her morning coffee. She was also 340 pounds. In the sterilized, image-obsessed echelons of ultra-wealth, her body was the only thing anyone ever saw. She wasn't Iris, the visionary. Behind her back, in the hushed, velvet-lined corridors of the Rainier Club, she was the Gallagher whale. She knew what they called her. She knew the way venture capitalists and board members looked at her, a mixture of intimidation and barely concealed disgust. They feared her mind, but they despised her form. For Iris, every day was an exercise in armor building. Her suits were custom-tailored in Milan, designed not to flatter, but to conceal and protect. She drove an armored SUV, lived in a sprawling, meticulously secured penthouse in Bellevue, and trusted absolutely no one. Especially not her younger sister, Caroline. Caroline was everything Iris was not. Petite, conventionally breathtaking, socially magnetic, and entirely devoid of business acumen. Yet, Caroline sat on the board of Gallagher Logistics, a constant, buzzing mosquito of corporate sabotage. Caroline desperately wanted to sell the company to a private equity firm, Aperture Capital, and cash out her shares to fund her lavish lifestyle. But Iris refused. So, Caroline changed tactics. If she couldn't beat Iris in the boardroom, she would destroy her psychologically. She would push her sister into a breakdown, forcing a medical leave of absence. The weapon of choice? A cruel, carefully orchestrated blind date. Across the water, in a drafty, two-bedroom duplex in Tacoma, Liam Dempsey was just trying to keep the lights on. At 34, Liam's life had been reduced to a spreadsheet of terrifying deficits. 3 years ago, he had owned a thriving custom carpentry business. Then his wife, Sarah, walked out on him for a real estate developer, taking half of his assets, draining their joint accounts, and leaving him with a mountain of debt and sole custody of their daughter, Chloe. Liam was a man whittled down to his absolute core. He had calloused hands, a perpetually exhausted gaze, and a fiercely protective love for his 6-year-old girl. He woke up at 4:30 a.m. every day, packed Chloe's lunch, dropped her off at a subsidized before-school program, and spent 10 hours breathing in sawdust and hauling lumber as a freelance contractor. He was 2 missed paychecks away from losing his home. The collision of these two worlds began with an exclusive, obscenely expensive matchmaking agency called the Elysian Roster. Caroline had gifted Iris a premier membership for her 35th birthday, framing it as an act of sisterly love. "You work too hard, B," Caroline had cooed in front of their mother, trapping Iris in a corner. "You deserve a personal life. Just go on one date. I've already paid the non-refundable $50,000 fee." Reluctantly, out of a misguided desire to appease her family, and perhaps a tiny, deeply buried ember of hope, Iris agreed. But Caroline had rigged the game. She had paid off one of the agency's consultants to bypass their usual roster of tech millionaires and aristocratic heirs. She specifically requested they find a man who was utterly desperate, someone drowning in debt, someone who would look at Iris and see nothing but a walking ATM. Caroline wanted a man who would either visibly recoil at Iris's weight, publicly humiliating her, or blatantly use her, breaking whatever fragile self-esteem Iris had left. The agency found Liam Dempsey. They approached Liam under the guise of an anonymous philanthropic benefactor who paid men to accompany high-profile female clients who needed escorts for security and social appearances. Liam was offered $5,000 just to show up, be polite, and have dinner. $5,000. To Liam, that wasn't just money. It was 3 months of rent. It was a new winter coat for Chloe. It was a temporary reprieve from the crushing weight on his chest. "I don't have to sleep with anyone, right?" Liam had asked the slick agent over the phone, rubbing the bridge of his nose, feeling the sting of his own compromised dignity. "Absolutely not, Mr. Dempsey. It is strictly a dinner. Our client is a highly private individual. You will go to Canlis, you will have a meal, you will be a gentleman, and the funds will be wired to your account by midnight." Liam ironed his only suit, a charcoal wool blend he had bought at a thrift store, and altered himself using his mother's old sewing machine. He didn't know he was walking into a trap. He didn't know he was supposed to be the weapon that destroyed a billionaire. The rain in Seattle was a relentless, icy drizzle the night of the date. Iris sat in the back of her Maybach, her heart hammering a frantic, agonizing rhythm against her ribs. She was wearing a midnight blue silk dress that draped elegantly over her frame, but she felt entirely exposed. He's going to be disappointed, she thought, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. He's going to see me, and his eyes are going to do that thing. She knew the thing intimately. The microscopic widening of the eyes, the rapid blink, the subtle shift in posture, the instinctual, physical withdrawal, when a man expected a billionaire heiress and was met with a woman who took up more space than society permitted. When her driver pulled up to Canlis, a restaurant practically hovering over Lake Union with its sweeping glass walls and hushed, elitist atmosphere, Iris took a deep breath, clutching her designer clutch like a shield. Liam was already there, waiting in the foyer. He felt entirely out of place amidst the sea of bespoke tuxedos and Rolexes. His hands, scarred and rough from years of carpentry, were shoved deep into his pockets. When the matron announced Iris, Liam turned. Iris froze. She braced for the flinch. She braced for the subtle tightening of his jaw. Liam looked at her, really looked at her. He took in the midnight blue dress, the raven hair pinned up in a sharp, elegant twist, and the stark, terrifying vulnerability in her dark eyes. He didn't see a punchline. He saw a woman who looked like she was walking to the gallows. Liam stepped forward, extending a hand. His smile wasn't the slick, practiced grin of a corporate climber. It was tired, warm, and astonishingly genuine. Iris, I'm Liam. Iris looked at his hand, then up at his face. You're not disappointed? The words slipped out before she could stop them, a raw betrayal of her anxiety. Liam's brow furrowed slightly in confusion. Why would I be? You look beautiful. The blue is incredible on you. It wasn't a line. His voice held the grounded, sturdy timbre of absolute truth. Iris felt a strange, terrifying flutter in her chest as she let him take her hand. His palm was rough, calloused the hand of a man who worked for a living. It grounded her instantly. The matron led them to a corner table. Iris's anxiety flared again. The chairs at Canlis were notoriously sleek, modern, and incredibly unforgiving. She hesitated, calculating if the arms of the chair would dig into her hips, if the frame would creak in the quiet dining room. Liam, noticing her millisecond of hesitation and reading the architecture of the furniture with a carpenter's eye, smoothly stepped ahead of the waiter. He pulled out a slightly wider, armless chair from the adjacent, unoccupied table. Let's switch this out, Liam said casually to the waiter, his tone leaving no room for argument. This one looks much more comfortable for a long dinner. He did it with such effortless grace, completely devoid of pity or spectacle, that the waiter simply nodded and swapped the chairs. Iris sat down, her throat tight. He noticed, and he didn't make me feel ashamed. Dinner began awkwardly, but Liam's total lack of pretense quickly chipped away at Iris's armor. He didn't ask about her portfolio. He didn't name drop. Instead, he told her about a catastrophic failure he had that morning trying to fix a vintage mahogany doorframe. He made her laugh, a real, uninhibited laugh that she hadn't heard from herself in years. She told him about the logistical nightmare of rerouting cargo ships around a hurricane, speaking with a passion she usually hid. For an hour, Iris Gallagher forgot she was the Gallagher whale. She was just a woman on a date with a handsome, intensely listening man. Then, Caroline's trap was sprung. A group of younger men, junior executives from a rival firm who had clearly been tipped off by Caroline, were seated 2 tables over. They had been drinking heavily. I'm telling you, it's a waste of a table, one of them sneered, loud enough to cut through the ambient jazz. I mean, how much food is she going to put away? No wonder the company's going under. She's probably eating the profits. The table of men erupted into muffled, cruel laughter. Iris froze. The warmth drained from her face, replaced by an icy, familiar numbness. Her hand began to tremble. This is it, she thought. This is where he excuses himself to go to the bathroom and never comes back. Liam stopped talking mid-sentence. He slowly placed his fork down. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, flinty darkness that made the air around him drop 10 degrees. Liam, please, it's fine, Iris whispered, shrinking into herself. Just ignore them. I don't ignore bullies, Iris, Liam said softly. Excuse me for a moment. He stood up. He didn't rush, nor did he shout. Liam walked over to the table of executives. He was not a billionaire, but he was 6'2", of solid, working-class muscle, forged by a life of heavy lifting and hard knocks. He stopped at the edge of their table. Is there a problem here? Liam asked, his voice low, dangerously calm. The loudest of the group, a guy in a slick Brioni suit, scoffed. Just having a private conversation, buddy. Mind your own business. Liam leaned down, placing his large, scarred hands flat on their pristine white tablecloth. He leaned in so close, the executive flinched. "You're going to stand up," Liam whispered, his voice a gravelly threat that carried an absolute promise of violence if tested. "You're going to walk over to my table, and you are going to apologize to the lady. And then you are going to pay your tab and leave. Because if I hear one more word out of your mouth, I'm going to drag you out of this restaurant by your bespoke lapels. Am I understood?" The executive looked at Liam's hands, then at the terrifying stillness in his eyes. The bravado evaporated. "Hey, man, no offense meant, just a joke. Apologize, now." The entire dining room had gone quiet. The executive swallowed hard, stood up, and walked over to Iris. He looked at the floor. "I apologize, ma'am. It was completely out of line." He scurried back, and within 2 minutes, the group had hastily paid and practically sprinted for the door. Liam walked back to the table and sat down, picking up his napkin as if he had merely gone to ask for the time. He looked at Iris, whose eyes were wide with shock and unshed tears. "Sorry about that," Liam said, his voice instantly softening back to the warm tone from earlier. "You were saying about the supply chains in Singapore?" Iris stared at him. Nobody had ever stood up for her. Her wealth commanded obedience, but it had never commanded actual physical defense. Her own family was the source of the ridicule. Yet this stranger, this man in a thrift store suit, had just shielded her without a second thought. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice cracking. Liam looked at her, his expression entirely earnest. "Because you're on a date with me, and nobody disrespects the woman I'm having dinner with." When the dinner ended, Liam walked Iris to her car. The rain had stopped, leaving the Seattle air sharp and clean. "I had a really wonderful time, Liam," Iris said, standing by the open door of the Maybach. She meant it. It terrified her how much she meant it. "So did I, Iris," Liam smiled. He didn't lean in for a kiss. He sensed she needed space, but he gently squeezed her hand. "Drive safe." As the car pulled away, Iris's mind went to war with itself. It was too perfect. Men like that did not just exist in a vacuum, waiting to be set up on blind dates with women like her. By the time she reached her penthouse, the ingrained paranoia of a billionaire had crept back in. She opened her encrypted laptop and immediately had her head of security run a deep, invasive background check on Liam Dempsey. Within an hour, the dossier hit her inbox. Iris sat in the glow of the screen, reading the brutal reality of Liam's life. The divorce records, the massive debts, the custody battle, the subsidized childcare for his daughter Chloe, and then she saw the bank transfer. An hour before their dinner, a shell company linked to her sister Caroline had deposited $5,000 into Liam's meager checking account. Iris felt the air get sucked out of the room. A cold, hollow ache spread through her chest. He was paid, she thought, the tears finally spilling over, hot and bitter. Caroline paid him to endure me. The defense at the restaurant, the charming conversation, the lack of judgment, it was all bought and paid for. I am a charity case. A $5,000 circus act. She didn't sleep that night. She drafted an email to her lawyers to begin the process of unseating Caroline from the board, fueled by pure, unadulterated heartbreak and rage. But as the sun rose over the Cascade Mountains, something nagged at Iris. She remembered the calluses on Liam's hands. She remembered the unfeigned fury in his eyes when those men insulted her. "You can pay a man to pretend to be polite," she reasoned, "but you cannot pay a man to look at you with genuine respect." Iris Gallagher was not a woman who made decisions based on half-truths. She needed to look him in the eye. At 3 p.m. the next day, a sleek black SUV pulled up to a dusty construction site in the Tacoma suburbs. Liam was on a ladder, covered in drywall, dust and sweat, installing a heavy oak window frame. When he saw Iris step out of the vehicle, wearing a stark black trench coat, his heart did a strange leap. He climbed down, wiping his hands on his jeans, a massive smile breaking across his tired face. "Iris, what are you doing here?" Iris stopped a few feet away, her expression unreadable. "My security team ran a background check on you, Liam." Liam's smile faltered. He sighed, looking down at his dust-covered boots. "I figured they would. Look, I know my financials are a mess." "I don't care about your debts," Iris interrupted, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to remain corporate and detached. "I care about the $5,000 that was wired to your account by my sister's proxy right before our date." Liam froze. The color drained from his face. "Your sister? Iris, I swear to God, I didn't know it was your sister. The agency said it was an anonymous benefactor." They said you just needed an escort for security reasons. And you took the money. Yes. Liam stepped forward, his voice raw with frustration and shame. Yes, I took the money. Do you know why? Because my daughter needs a dentist. Iris. Because the bank is threatening to foreclose on my duplex. Because my ex-wife destroyed my life. And I am drowning. He ran a hand through his dusty hair. But I didn't know it was a setup. And the minute I sat down at that table with you, the money didn't matter. I stayed because of you. Iris searched his eyes. She was an expert at reading liars in boardrooms. Liam Dempsey was not lying. He was stripped bare, humiliated, and telling the absolute truth. Before Iris could respond, a battered yellow school bus pulled up to the corner of the site. A tiny girl with messy pigtails and a bright pink backpack bounded out, sprinting toward them. Daddy! Liam's entire demeanor shifted. The tension vanished, replaced by a radiant, unconditional love. He knelt right there in the dirt, catching the little girl as she launched into his arms. Hey, bug! Liam laughed, spinning her around before setting her down. Chloe looked at Iris, her big green eyes wide with curiosity. She didn't see a billionaire. She didn't see the Gallagher whale. She saw a lady in a very pretty coat. Hi, Chloe chirped, completely devoid of the hesitation adults always showed. Are you my dad's friend? I like your coat. You look like a spy. Iris, who terrified grown men on a daily basis, melted. A genuine, soft smile broke through her stoic facade. She knelt down, surprisingly graceful, bringing herself to Chloe's eye level. Thank you, Chloe. I'm Iris. And you look like a princess who knows how to fight dragons. Chloe giggled, instantly delighted. Liam watched them, a lump forming in his throat. He saw the way Iris looked at his daughter with profound gentleness and respect. Iris, Liam said softly, stepping closer. I'll wire the money back to the agency today. I don't want it, but I do want to see you again. No money, no agencies, no high-end restaurants. Just let me cook dinner for you, at my place. Iris looked up at him. She looked at the dust on his face, the desperation and hope in his eyes, and the little girl holding onto his pant leg. For the first time in her life, the walls of her fortress didn't just crack, they shattered entirely. Okay, Iris whispered. I'd like that. Neither of them knew that across town, Caroline had already received word from her private investigator that Iris was at Liam's job site. The trap hadn't worked the way Caroline intended, but seeing Iris attach herself to a bankrupt carpenter gave Caroline exactly the ammunition she needed to present to the board. The real war was just beginning. The air inside Liam's cramped Tacoma duplex smelled of roasted garlic, rosemary, and the lemon-scented cleaner he had aggressively scrubbed the countertops with an hour before Iris's arrival. The kitchen was the size of Iris's walk-in shoe closet, with faded linoleum floors and a refrigerator that hummed with a persistent, mechanical wheeze. Yet, as Iris sat at the small, nicked oak dining table, a piece Liam had built himself, she felt a profound, alien sense of peace. She wasn't wearing Milanese armor tonight. She wore a simple cashmere sweater and dark jeans. For the first time in a decade, she wasn't calculating shipping tonnage or hedging fuel prices. She was watching a man cook for her. So, the secret to a good roast chicken, Liam explained, pulling a sizzling cast iron skillet from the oven, his forearm muscles flexing under a faded flannel shirt, is butter under the skin. It's terrible for you, but it's the only way to do it right. Chloe was sitting on the floor in the living room, intensely focused on building a wildly unstable tower out of colorful magnetic tiles. Daddy burns the toast sometimes, but his chicken is the best, she shouted without looking up. Iris laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place she thought had dried out years ago. She watched Liam move around the kitchen with an easy, fluid grace. He poured her a glass of $12 Cabernet as if it were a vintage Bordeaux. He treated her not like a fragile glass figurine or a monstrous obstacle, but like a woman. They ate, they talked about everything from Chloe's obsession with marine biology to Liam's dream of opening a boutique furniture workshop. There was no pretense. There was only warmth. But while Iris was finding her humanity in a working-class neighborhood, Caroline was meticulously dismantling her empire 30 miles north. The emergency board meeting of Gallagher Logistics was convened at 8 a.m. the following morning. Iris had barely taken her seat at the head of the long mahogany conference table when Richard Croft, the 70-year-old chairman of the board and a longtime ally of their late father, Arthur Gallagher, cleared his throat. He looked deeply uncomfortable. Iris, Richard began, refusing to meet her eyes, we need to discuss your recent distractions and the liability they present to the shareholders. Iris's spine stiffened. Distractions, Richard? We closed the Asian Pacific freight route ahead of schedule and under budget last week. The stock is up 4%. What exactly are we discussing? Caroline, sitting at the opposite end of the table in a pristine white Chanel suit, slid a thick manila folder across the polished wood. We are discussing your mental fitness, B, and your susceptibility to extortion. Iris opened the folder. Inside were dozens of high-resolution photographs. Iris at the construction site, Iris walking into Liam's duplex, Liam's bank statements, Liam's bankruptcy filings, the divorce papers highlighting his crippling debt. The CEO of a $4 billion logistics firm, Caroline said, her voice dripping with venomous faux concern, is currently fraternizing with a bankrupt, desperate contractor. A man who was literally paid to endure a single dinner with her. The board feels that your severe insecurities have compromised your judgment. You are an easy mark for a grifter, Iris. He is not a grifter, Iris snapped, her voice cracking like a whip, silencing the room. And my personal life is none of your concern. It becomes our concern, Richard interjected softly. When Aperture Capital is threatening to pull their multi-million-dollar infrastructure investment because they believe the CEO is having a psychological breakdown, we have a fiduciary duty, Iris. You are emotionally compromised. The trap snapped shut. Caroline hadn't just wanted to humiliate Iris, she wanted to build a narrative of incompetence. By framing Liam as a gold-digging predator and Iris as a pathetic, emotionally starved victim, Caroline painted a picture of a CEO who could easily be blackmailed or manipulated into signing away company assets. I motion for an immediate, involuntary 6-month leave of absence for the chief executive officer, Caroline announced, her eyes gleaming with triumph, pending a full psychological evaluation. During this time, I will step in as interim CEO to finalize the Aperture Capital acquisition. Iris looked around the room. The 8 men and women who had watched her triple the company's valuation over the last 5 years all looked away. They were cowards, easily spooked by scandal, and eager for the massive payouts the Aperture buyout would bring. You're making a mistake, Iris said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. She looked dead at Caroline. You don't know how to run this company. You will sink it in a month. I know how to sell it, Caroline smiled. The vote was unanimous. Within 20 minutes, Iris Gallagher was stripped of her security clearance, her corporate email was locked, and she was escorted out of her own building by 2 security guards she had personally hired. Standing on the cold Seattle pavement, the drizzle soaking into her wool coat, Iris felt the world spin out of control. She had spent her entire life building an impenetrable fortress around herself, and her sister had just casually bulldozed it to the ground. She reached for her phone. She didn't call her lawyers. She didn't call her publicist. She called Liam. Liam found her sitting on a bench near Pike Place Market, staring blankly out at the gray, churning waters of Elliott Bay. The paparazzi hadn't caught wind of the coup yet, but Iris knew it was only a matter of hours before the business blogs and tabloids exploded with the news. Billionaire CEO ousted. The Gallagher whale beached. She could already see the headlines. Liam didn't ask questions when he arrived. He parked his battered Ford F-150 illegally, jogged over through the rain, and wrapped his large, calloused hands around her freezing ones. Come on, was all he said. You're freezing. He drove her back to Tacoma. Iris sat in the passenger seat, staring at the rain streaking the windshield, the reality of her dethroning settling into her bones like lead. They took it, Iris whispered, the first words she had spoken in an hour. My father's company. Caroline took it. She's going to sell it to a private equity firm that will gut the pension funds, fire thousands of workers, and sell the fleet for scrap. And she used you to do it. She explained everything. She laid out the board's narrative, how they weaponized his poverty and her perceived desperation to paint her as unfit. She waited for him to get angry. She waited for him to realize that being associated with her was a toxic liability. Instead, Liam pulled the truck into his driveway, put it in park, and turned to her. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were entirely steady. So they think I'm a con artist, and they think you're weak, Liam said gruffly. They don't know me, and they clearly have no idea who the hell you are. I have nothing right now, Liam. My accounts are frozen pending the transition audit. I'm locked out. Good, Liam said, surprising her. You don't need their money right now. You need a war room, and you need to figure out how to take your company back. Over the next 2 weeks, the Tacoma duplex transformed. Iris, who usually commanded legions of analysts, sat cross-legged on Liam's worn living room rug, surrounded by printed-out corporate bylaws, shipping manifests, and legacy legal documents that Liam had helped her pull from public records at the county courthouse. The media storm was vicious. Caroline fed the press carefully curated leaks, painting Iris as a tragic recluse who had lost her mind over a blue-collar romance. Paparazzi tried to swarm Liam's house, but Liam, leveraging his connections with the local construction crews, had half a dozen massive, burly framers and roofers park their work trucks at the end of his street, effectively blocking the press fans from getting anywhere near the duplex. Living in close quarters, Iris saw the stark, grinding reality of Liam's life. She saw the stack of past-due medical bills for Chloe's asthma treatments. She saw Liam skip dinner twice, claiming he had a late lunch at the site, just to make sure there was enough food for Iris and his daughter. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He is literally sacrificing his own survival to protect me. One evening, after Chloe had gone to sleep, Liam sat next to Iris on the floor, handing her a mug of cheap instant coffee. "You're staring a hole through that paper, B," he said gently, rubbing the back of his neck, exhausted from a 12-hour shift. Iris looked up, her eyes burning with a fierce, reignited fire. The depression had burned away, replaced by the lethal, calculating intellect that had built the company in the first place. "I found it," she whispered, tapping a dense paragraph in a dusty, 20-year-old legal document. "My father's original trust." Arthur Gallagher was paranoid about hostile takeovers. He built a dead man's switch into the foundational charter. Liam leaned in, trying to make sense of the dense legalese. "What does it mean?" "It means," Iris smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that made Liam's pulse jump, "that any sale of more than 50% of the company's total assets to a non-logistics entity like Aperture Capital requires the physical, notarized signature of the majority shareholder acting in a sound, uncoerced state." But here is the loophole. If the primary shareholder is deemed incapacitated or is on administrative leave, the voting power doesn't default to the interim CEO. Who does it default to? It defaults to a legally designated proxy of the primary shareholder's choosing, a proxy filed with the state registry, not the corporate board. Iris looked at him. Caroline thinks she has full authority because she's interim CEO, but she doesn't. She can negotiate the deal, but she can't sign the final execution order. Only my proxy can. "So, who is your proxy?" Liam asked. Iris took a deep breath. "I never designated one, but the charter allows me to name one at any time, provided it is notarized and filed before the final vote." She reached out and took Liam's rough hand. "Liam, the board locked me out because they claim I am mentally compromised by our relationship. If I walk into that final shareholder meeting, they will tie me up in litigation for years. But if my legal proxy walks in..." Liam's eyes widened as he realized what she was asking. "Iris, I'm a carpenter. I don't know anything about corporate buyouts. You know how to stand your ground against bullies," Iris said fiercely. "You proved that at Canlis. You proved that by keeping the press away from this house. I don't need a lawyer, Liam. I need someone who Caroline can't buy, intimidate, or break. I need you." Liam looked at the paperwork, then at the brilliant, beautiful woman sitting on his floor. She was trusting him with a $4 billion empire. She was trusting him with her life's work. "What's the plan?" he asked. "Caroline scheduled the final signing with Aperture Capital for next Friday at the Gallagher building," Iris said, her mind already moving a million miles a minute. "It's going to be a massive press event. She wants to publicly parade the sale. We are going to let her set the stage. And then we are going to burn it down." The legal maneuvering took 4 agonizing, sleepless days. Liam drove Iris to a strip mall notary public in South Tacoma, far away from the prying eyes of downtown Seattle's corporate law firms. There, under the flickering fluorescent lights of a storefront that doubled as a tax preparation office, Iris Gallagher officially signed away the absolute voting power of her shares to Liam Dempsey. When the notary handed back the stamped document, Liam stared at his name on the thick parchment, legal proxy and executor of shareholder rights. He was officially holding the keys to a $4.2 billion kingdom. "I won't let you down, B," Liam said quietly, sliding the document into a battered leather satchel. "I know you won't," Iris replied, her dark eyes flashing with a renewed, dangerous energy. "But stopping the sale is only half the battle. If we just block Aperture Capital, the board will still try to oust me permanently, citing my instability. Caroline has poisoned the well. To take the company back, I don't just need a block, I need a buyout. I need to purchase the shares of the defecting board members, so I hold an unassailable supermajority. And my personal assets are still frozen by the corporate injunction." Liam leaned against his truck, looking out over the gritty, industrial skyline of the port of Tacoma. He watched the massive cargo cranes painted in the signature Gallagher Logistics navy blue hoisting shipping containers onto freighters. He thought about the men and women operating those cranes. Men like him, people who woke up at dawn, broke their backs, and prayed their pensions would be there when their knees finally gave out. "You told me Aperture Capital plans to gut the company," Liam said slowly, a thought forming in his mind. "They're going to liquidate the assets and raid the employee pension funds to pay off the acquisition debt, right?" "That's standard private equity playbook, yes," Iris nodded, stepping closer. "Within a year, they'll lay off 30% of the workforce to artificially boost the stock price before they sell it off in pieces." Liam turned to her, his jaw set. "Your board of directors might not care about that, but I know who will. The people who actually move your freight." That evening, Liam didn't take Iris to a corporate boardroom. He took her to a dimly lit, sawdust-covered union hall near the shipyards. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer and industrial grease. Sitting at the back table was Michael Mick O'Connor, the 60-year-old president of the Pacific Northwest Freight and Longshoremen's Union. Mick was a man built like a cinder block, with a face mapped by decades of labor disputes and dockyard brawls. Liam introduced them. Mick didn't stand up. He looked at Iris with open skepticism, refusing to shake her hand. "I know who you are, Miss Gallagher," Mick rumbled, taking a slow sip of his stout. "And I know your sister is about to sell the ground out from under my workers." "Why should I give a damn about a family squabble between two billionaires?" "Because if my sister signs that deal on Friday, your workers lose their pensions, Mick," Iris said, not flinching, meeting his hard stare with one of her own. She sat down opposite him, uninvited. "Aperture Capital is going to declare bankruptcy on the logistics subsidiary to legally void the union contracts. I know their CEO, Jonathan Hayes. He's done it to 3 other transport companies. Your people will be out on the street with nothing." Mick's eyes narrowed. "And what makes you any different? You're a suit." "I am a suit who built this supply chain from the ground up," Iris countered, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "I kept the docks open during the recession when the board begged me to shut them down. I am the reason your workers had overtime last quarter. I am not asking for your pity. I am offering you a partnership." She leaned forward, laying out the strategy she and Liam had devised. "The union's pension fund has over $400 million in liquid capital. If the union uses that capital to back a leveraged buyout of the panicked board members' shares, you become my largest voting partner. You don't just work for Gallagher Logistics anymore, Mick. The workers will own a 20% stake in the company, guaranteed board seats, ironclad contracts, but I need the capital pledge by Friday to execute the hostile takeover of my own company." Mick looked at the brilliant, commanding woman in front of him, and then looked at Liam, a local contractor who had stood on picket lines with these men. The bridge between the billionaire and the dock worker had been built by a single dad with nothing to lose. Mick slowly extended a massive, scarred hand across the table. "You better not miss, Gallagher." Friday morning arrived with the grim, inevitable tension of an execution. The 44th floor of the Gallagher building was swarming with business journalists, photographers, and champagne-carrying waitstaff. Caroline Gallagher stood at the head of the glass-walled boardroom, practically glowing in a custom scarlet Dior suit. Beside her stood Jonathan Hayes, the predatory, slick-haired CEO of Aperture Capital, flanked by his army of corporate lawyers. Richard Croft and the rest of the board sat at the mahogany table, looking nervous but eager for their massive payouts. The acquisition documents, hundreds of pages thick, sat in the center of the table alongside a gold-plated Mont Blanc pen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Caroline announced, smiling for the flashing cameras positioned outside the glass doors. "Today marks a new, prosperous era for Gallagher Logistics. By finalizing this merger with Aperture Capital, we are ensuring unparalleled shareholder value." Jonathan Hayes picked up the pen, signing his name with a flourish on the primary execution line. He slid the binder across the polished wood to Caroline. "To the future, Madam CEO." Caroline reached for the pen. Her fingers had barely brushed the gold barrel when the heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open with a deafening crack. The security guard stationed outside had been pushed aside. Standing in the doorway was Liam Dempsey. He wasn't wearing a bespoke Italian suit. He was wearing his charcoal thrift store wool suit, meticulously pressed, his shoulders broad, and his posture radiating the terrifying, unmovable presence of a man defending his family. The cameras immediately pivoted, the flashbulbs blinding in the sudden silence of the room. "The future's going to have to wait," Liam's voice boomed, deep and resonant, cutting through the corporate sterile air like a chainsaw. Caroline's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of sheer panic and fury. Security! Get this man out of here immediately! How did he get past the lobby? Two burly security guards stepped forward, reaching for Liam's arms. Liam didn't flinch. He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out a stack of documents, slamming them down on the edge of the conference table with such force that the champagne flutes rattled. "If you lay a hand on me," Liam said, his eyes locking onto the guards with chilling calm, "you are assaulting the legal proxy of the majority shareholder of this corporation, and I will personally see to it that you are sued into oblivion." The guards hesitated, looking at Richard Croft, who suddenly looked very pale. "What is this?" Jonathan Hayes demanded, his slick veneer cracking. "Caroline, who is this contractor?" "He's a nobody," Caroline shrieked, losing her composure. "He's a broke, desperate carpenter who is extorting my sister. He has no authority here." Liam stepped up to the table, ignoring Caroline completely. He looked directly at Richard Croft. "Mr. Croft. Article set. Section 4 of the Foundational Charter instituted by Arthur Gallagher states that any sale of more than 50% of the assets requires the physical signature of the majority shareholder or their designated proxy. Liam tapped the notarized document on the table. Iris Gallagher holds 51% of the voting shares. She has designated me as her proxy with full, unmitigated power of attorney regarding her equity. And on her behalf, I am explicitly vetoing this sale. Chaos erupted. The lawyers scrambled to snatch up the documents, reading frantically through the text. "It's a forgery!" Caroline screamed. "She is medically on leave. She doesn't have the mental capacity to assign a proxy." Actually, a cool, razor-sharp voice echoed from the doorway. "My mental capacity is perfectly fine. Though my patience for your treason, Caroline, has officially expired." The press parted like the Red Sea. Iris Gallagher walked into the boardroom. She did not look like the broken, humiliated woman they had escorted out 2 weeks ago. She wore a tailored, midnight blue power suit that accentuated her formidable presence. She walked with the absolute terrifying authority of an apex predator returning to her territory. She walked right up to Liam, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. "The proxy is ironclad, Richard," Iris said, her voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. "You triggered the dead man's switch when you tried to steal my father's legacy." "Iris, be reasonable," Richard stammered, sweating profusely. "The board voted. We want out. Aperture is offering a premium. If you block this, we will sue you for breach of fiduciary duty, and we will tie this company up in litigation until it bleeds to death." Iris smiled. It was a terrifying sight. "You want out, Richard? Fine, you're out." She signaled to the doorway. Mick O'Connor walked in, flanked by 2 union lawyers carrying briefcases. Mick looked around the lavish boardroom with sheer disgust before tossing a certified bank draft onto the table, right on top of the Aperture Capital contract. "What is this?" Jonathan Hayes asked, genuinely bewildered. "That," Iris stated, "is a formal, fully funded buyout offer for the collective shares of every board member who voted for my suspension, backed by the Pacific Northwest Freight and Longshoremen's Union Pension Fund. You wanted a payout, Richard? There it is. At current market value, not Aperture's inflated, debt-leveraged premium. You will take it, you will resign your seats, and you will leave my building. If you refuse, I will use my 51% to fire you, dilute your shares, and drag you into a brutal legal war of attrition that you do not have the stomach for." The board members looked at the bank draft, then at Iris, then at the massive union boss standing by the door. The reality of their total defeat washed over them. They had been outmaneuvered, outflanked, and utterly destroyed. Caroline was shaking with rage. "You can't do this, B. You can't give the company to the unions and a common carpenter. I am the interim CEO." "Not anymore," Iris said, turning to her sister, her eyes devoid of any familial warmth. "Because part of my internal audit over the last 4 days uncovered the shell company you used to wire $5,000 to the Elysian roster agency to orchestrate my humiliation. Using corporate funds for personal sabotage is embezzlement, Caroline. My lawyers have already forwarded the files to the SEC and the district attorney." Caroline's face drained of all color. She stepped back, bumping into the glass wall. "B, please." "Get out of my chair, Caroline," Iris ordered softly. 10 minutes later, the Aperture Capital executives had packed their briefcases and fled. The board members were scrambling to sign the union buyout papers to avoid total ruin. Security, now firmly back under Iris's command, was escorting a weeping Caroline Gallagher to the elevators. The boardroom emptied, leaving only Iris and Liam standing amidst the scattered papers and half-empty champagne flutes. Iris let out a long, shuddering breath. The adrenaline was finally beginning to fade, leaving her exhausted but triumphant. She turned to Liam. He was watching her, that same warm, incredibly grounding smile on his face. "You were terrifying," Liam laughed softly, loosening his thrift store tie. "Remind me never to negotiate a contract with you." "I could never negotiate against you, Liam," Iris said, stepping closer, looking up into his eyes. "You gave me my life back. You stood between me and a firing squad." "You built the bullets, Bee," Liam said, reaching out to gently brush a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I just pulled the trigger." "The offer still stands," Iris whispered, her heart hammering, not with anxiety this time, but with an overwhelming, profound love. "I need a partner, not just for the company." Liam didn't answer with words. He cupped her face in his scarred, calloused hands, leaning down and kissing her. It wasn't a desperate, cinematic collision. It was a deep, steady, and anchoring promise. It was the kiss of a man who saw her exactly as she was, and cherished every single part of her. A year later, the skyline of Seattle looked the same, but the power structures within it had fundamentally shifted. Gallagher Logistics had not collapsed. In fact, with the union holding board seats, strikes vanished, productivity skyrocketed, and the company reported its most profitable quarters in a decade. Iris was heralded in the business press, not as the Gallagher whale, but as the visionary who successfully integrated labor and executive leadership into an unstoppable global force. Caroline was serving a 3-year suspended sentence for corporate fraud and was permanently barred from serving on any corporate boards. She was last seen moving into a modest apartment in Portland, cut off entirely from the Gallagher fortune. But the most significant changes happened far away from the boardroom. In a sprawling, sunlit workshop on the edge of Lake Washington, Liam Dempsey wiped the sawdust from his brow. Dempsey Custom Furniture had opened 6 months prior. Liam hadn't taken a dime of Iris's money to start it. Instead, he had secured a small business loan, which Iris practically had to tie her own hands behind her back to avoid paying off for him, and built the business on his own craftsmanship. He now had a 6-month waiting list for his bespoke oak dining tables and hand-carved bed frames. The heavy workshop doors slid open, and the crisp autumn breeze blew in off the lake. Iris walked in, wearing a pair of comfortable, paint-splattered overalls over a simple white t-shirt. She was carrying a massive, insulated thermos of coffee and a box of pastries. She wasn't hiding behind Milanese armor anymore. She walked with the easy, radiant confidence of a woman who is fiercely loved. Right behind her, 7-year-old Chloe sprinted into the shop, wearing a miniature pair of safety goggles. "Daddy, look what Bee bought me!" Chloe shrieked, holding up a complicated motorized robotics kit. "We're gonna build a robot that serves snacks." Liam laughed, catching Chloe in a bear hug and swinging her around. "A snack robot? That sounds like a major engineering project. You think you and Bee can handle it?" "We manage global supply chains, Liam," Iris smirked, setting the coffee down on a workbench and wrapping her arms around his waist from behind, resting her chin on his broad shoulder. "I think we can handle a snack robot." Liam turned in her arms, kissing her deeply, ignoring the sawdust transferring to her overalls. "Tough day at the office, boss?" Liam asked, smiling against her lips. "The easiest," Iris replied, her dark eyes shining, "because I knew I was coming home to you." They say $1 billion buys you anything, but Iris Gallagher knew the truth. Money could buy power, it could buy fear, and it could buy an empire. But it couldn't buy the way Liam Dempsey looked at her when she walked into a room. It couldn't buy the sound of Chloe's laughter echoing through a house that finally felt like a home. And it couldn't buy the undeniable, rock-solid strength of a man who looked at a woman the world had dismissed and saw the only queen he would ever serve. What an incredible journey for Iris and Liam. It just goes to show that true value isn't measured in billions of dollars or physical appearance, but in the strength of your character and the courage to stand by the people you love. Did Caroline get what she deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love this story of redemption, loyalty, and true love, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing real-life dramas.
Hi, my name is Hidden Princess, the owner and manager of Hidden Princess. After watching the video, a single dad was set up with an obese CEO. Then he treated her like no one else did. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the theme of seeing people for who they truly are, rather than judging them by appearances or circumstances. Liam showed kindness and respect when it would have been easier to follow the crowd, and Iris found someone who valued her character instead of her status. It's a reminder that genuine connections are often built on understanding, not assumptions. Do you think Liam's honesty was what changed Iris's life the most? And which moment in the story made the biggest impression on you? In everyday life, maybe we can all try to look beyond first impressions and give people the chance to show us who they really are. Thank you for spending time with us today. If this story meant something to you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, consider liking or subscribing for more.